Pam, that woman over there is a dear friend of mine. Now, she is going through a very difficult period. So, whatever she asks you, please, just say no.
What?
No.
Diane,
Yes?
would you excuse us a moment?
Fine.
Would you object to joining me in my hotel room for an afternoon of wild animal passion?
No! What's your name?
Does it matter?
No!
That was Shelley Long, Ted Danson, and Julia Duffy in a scene from the classic situation comedy Cheers, co-written by today's guest, writer Ken Levine. Hello and welcome to episode 119 of the Occasional Film Podcast, the occasional companion podcast to the Fast Cheap Movie Thoughts blog. I'm the blog's editor, John Gaspard. In today's episode, we'll chat with Ken Levine about how he broke into the business and the business of producing comedy on television. In addition to his work with writing partner David Isaacs, Ken is also a television director, sitcom showrunner, baseball announcer, playwright, podcaster, and, going back to his first love, a cartoonist. Was being a writer always a goal?
I don't know if it was always a goal. It was something that I always did. Honestly, I did not get a lot of encouragement in high school. I was a cartoonist, I still am, and I was a cartoonist on the school newspaper. And I said, well, I also want to write. You know, can I cover sports or do a humor column or something? And they said, you're the cartoonist, just stick to cartoons. And I said, well, I really want to write. And if you won't let me write, then I'm going to quit the paper. And they said, then fine, quit the paper. So that's how much my cartoons were even valued.
They called your bluff on that one, I guess.
They called my bluff, yeah.
Just as a little tangent, just because I'm a big fan of your cartoons, did you have a couple of cartoonist heroes when you were growing up, guys that you looked at and went, that's the kind of writing I want to do?
Well, my cartoonist heroes were more due to their cartooning than anything. Al Hirschfeld,
Right.
who did the caricatures of the New York Times, was my god.
Yeah.
And Mort Drucker would be another. Jack Davis,
Yeah.
A lot of those mad guys. I wanted to be in radio. I mean, I really loved radio, and a lot of my comic influences early on were disc jockeys, you know, Bob and Ray and Dan Ingram and Dick Whittington. So radio was a goal. I got out of college and became a top 40 disc jockey. But I always, let me back up. When I was in college, I got a job as an intern at KMPC in LA. We were the big full service radio station. They had the Angels and the Rams and the Bruins, and, you know, they were big music personalities. And their afternoon drive time jock was Gary Owens, who was on Laugh-In at the time, you know, from beautiful downtown Burbank. And I would write comedy material for Gary for him to use on the air. I never charged him for it. I mean, I was just so thrilled that someone the caliber of Gary Owens would use my material on the radio. And one day I get a call to appear in George Slaughter's office. George Slaughter was the producer of Laugh-In. And this was when Laugh-In was getting 50 shares. And I'm like, what does George Slaughter want with me? So I go to the meeting, obviously, and apparently, unbeknownst to me, Gary submitted my comedy material to him. And George Slaughter offered me a job as a writer on Laugh-In. And it's funny, we laughed about it because George is still around and he was a guest on my podcast. And I talked about this. And I said, can I do this part-time or from home? And he goes, what? No, this is a job. You come to the office every day. We're paying you a lot of money to write on the #1 show in America. And I said, I would lose my 2S deferment and I would wind up drafted in Vietnam, so I couldn't take it. So I had to turn down Laugh-In. So I was almost a writer 6 years before I actually broke in. Yeah.
Okay, so how did you end up then meeting up with David Isaacs?
Like I said, I became a disc jockey out of college. My draft number was 4. And like I said, I was at KMPC, and one of our disc jockeys, Roger Carroll, was one of the main AFRTS disc jockeys. And I shopped around and I was looking, is there a decent reserve unit I could join that would, keep me out of the Army? And I saw that there was an Armed Forces Radio Reserve unit in LA. And through Roger, he helped pull some strings and got me in the unit. It's like one of those things where, you get a call saying, okay, there's an opening in the unit, but you got to go down to Torrance and sign up for it tomorrow. And so you don't have time to think, boy, do I want to risk this? Is there a way I can get a medical thing? Can I get, it's like, okay. And it's 6 years. It's a 6-year commitment. Go. So that's what I did. I got into that unit, and we were at summer camp 3 years later, and somebody new to the unit was David Isaacs. And we met and started talking, and we both kind of had desires to be writers. And when summer camp ended, I was at the time working as a disc jockey in San Bernardino. I got fired, which was a frequent occurrence. And I came back home to live with my parents in LA. And I called David and I said, hey, remember me from the Army? I want to try writing a script. You want to try writing it with me? And he said, okay. And so we got together and decided to partner up. And we wrote a pilot, but we didn't know anything. We had no clue what we were doing. And I had to literally go to a bookstore in Hollywood, and on a remainder table were TV scripts. And so for $2, I bought a copy of an episode of The Odd Couple and looked at that. Oh, interior Madison apartment day. That's what that is. And this is the format, and this is how long they are. So David and I wrote a pilot about 2 kids in college, which was the sum total of our life experience back then. We were both 23, and it didn't go anywhere, obviously, but we had a good time doing it. And we then learned the way to break in is to write spec scripts from existing shows. So that's what we did. And eventually we broke in.
So had you written anything with him before that, or seen any of his writing? What was it that made you
No,
think
no,
this is the guy?
no. He just seemed like a funny guy. Neither of us had written anything. So neither of us had any writing samples for the other. No, we just sat down together and just tried doing it. It probably was a help that we were both starting from the same place, which was nowhere. Yeah, it's just kind of one of those happy accidents where, you go on a blind date and it turns out to be your wife,
And how many years did you guys write together?
Well, we're still writing together. If somebody would hire us, 50 years.
Congratulations.
Yeah. October of 73 is when we started.
And I'm trying to remember, was it the Tony Randall Show or the Jeffersons where you sold your first script?
Jeffersons.
And how did that happen?
Well, we had written spec Mary Tyler Moore and a spec Rhoda and another spec pilot, which was better but didn't go anywhere. And one day my mom is playing golf with a guy who says he's the story editor of the Jeffersons, a new show that just came on. My mom says, oh, well, my son is a great young writer. And you're like, oh, Christ. And he says, all right, we'll just have him call me. So I called him, and the guy says, you have a script? And I said, yeah. And he goes, all right, send the script. If I like the script, we'll talk. Okay. And I sent off our Mary Tyler Moore show, and I got a letter back saying, oh, this is a really good script, make an appointment, come on in and pitch stories. And we pitched stories and they bought one. And so that's how we got our assignment.
Thinking back, is there one moment that you felt like was really pivotal that officially launched you guys?
Yeah, doing that first MASH episode. We had done Jeffersons, we had done episodes of Joe and Sons, which was a terrible show on CBS. We had done some stories for Barney Miller, but Danny Arnold always cut us off before we got to script. We did a backup script for a pilot that didn't go. And then we got MASH. And our first episode of MASH, which is the one where the gas heater blows up and Hawkeye is temporarily blind. And that script was like our golden ticket.
It's a very memorable episode.
No, thank you. I remember it.
I spoke with, I don't know if you know her, April Smith, and she said she learned everything she learned about writing in a room from Gene Reynolds. Where did you learn about writing in a room?
Well, I don't know about writing in a room from Gene, because we never worked in a room really with Gene, but I learned more about storytelling and more about story construction from Gene Reynolds than everybody else combined. And I've been very lucky to have a lot of great mentors along the way, or to work with, really talented writers and smart enough to just shut up and listen and learn from them. But if I had to pick one true mentor, it would be Gene Reynolds. Yeah, I cannot say enough about Gene Reynolds. I owe my career to Gene Reynolds.
What was his special gift?
First of all, he was very much a gentleman. So when he would give you notes, if he didn't like a joke, he wouldn't go, Jesus, guys, the fuck. He would go, and you might take another look at this. Okay, you might take another look at that joke. Okay. Gene had a great story sense that was combined with a real humanity. It had to be more than just funny. It had to be grounded. There had to be, like I said, some humanity to it. And the humanity and nice moments and things had to be earned. And he was very clever in constructing stories where things were set up and then got paid off in a somewhat surprising way. Look for inventive, different ways of finding a solution. It's why, to me, storytelling is always so hard, because each time you tell a story, you want it to be different. You don't want to just keep retelling the same story over and over again. And Gene would look at a thing and go, God, is there a better way of conveying this? Is there something more interesting that Hawkeye could do once he learns this information? And Gene, you could give Gene an outline and everyone can go, okay, well, this doesn't work. Gene could go, this doesn't work, and here's why, and here's how you can fix it. If Radar knows this, and then Hot Lips does this, then you could do a fun thing where it's a thing, and and you're going like, man, he just solved it. Just solved it. I thank him for that. He's very tough on story, which I took from him. And again, there's the humanity aspect of it, which normally you think, well, okay, yeah, that's just part of it. But, when I see shows today, and I know I'm going to sound like, old guy, get off my lawn. But when I see shows today like White Lotus and a lot of these other shows that are just mean-spirited, where the laughs are coming from watching horrible people do horrible things to each other, And, look, comedy changes and, society changes, etc. But to me, there has to be some heart to it. There has to be some humanity. And that was so drummed into me by Gene. Gene also talked about the value of research, which I have learned a lot. You go off to write a project about whatever that you're going to do a pilot about the Department of Motor Vehicles. You sort of know a lot about the Department of Motor Vehicles. You've stood in the lines and everything. But Gene would say, go there, talk to those people. What is that job really like? What do they really do? And immerse yourself in that world. And that's what I've always done since. Jim Brooks, who worked with Gene on Room 222, would say the same thing, that he learned the value of research from Gene. And, when Jim Brooks did broadcast news, he spent a tremendous amount of time in newsrooms talking to those people, getting a sense of authenticity, and it requires work, it requires a lot of extra legwork, but it makes the scripts richer and more authentic and is worth putting in the time and effort. I just had Michael Conley on as a guest on my podcast. And one of the things I asked him, he does the Bosch books and Lincoln Lawyer and my favorite mystery writer. And I said, so with all the detectives out there, what's so special about yours and your books? And he said, the authenticity, that he spent years on the crime beat at the Los Angeles Times and really got to know the inside workings of the LAPD, and that there is an authenticity to his books that you don't get with a lot. And it's like, yeah, well, it makes a difference.
Research pays off. Okay, one more TV question. What inspired your move into directing?
I'd been a writer for many, many years. A lot of those years I was on staff of a show, and years when I wasn't on staff of a show. Since I'm a good joke guy, I would get a job as a consultant on a show, meaning I would work one night a week, which was always rewrite night.
What a great gig.
It was a great gig. You worked long hours, but it was a great gig. And at the time, the pay was ridiculous. There was one season I was on 4 shows. So I was working basically 4 nights till 2, 3 o'clock in the morning. And it got to the point where I would go down to the stage and I would kind of dread going down to the stage, because all I was worried about was, okay, let this not be a train wreck. Okay, let this be in good shape that I can go home at 10 or 11 or 12. And I thought to myself, there's something wrong here. You get into the business, you should want to be on the stage. So I said, be a director and be on the stage and play all day with the actors. And then when it comes time for rewriting, good luck, guys. You go to the room and rewrite, and I go to a Laker game. So that was my motivation. It should be fun. If you're in television and you're in multi-camera shows, you should look forward to going down to the stage. And if you don't, then it's time to change things around. So that was my motivation.
Did you feel like you had any advantages as a director because of your background in writing and your understanding of scene construction?
Yes. Number one, the writing served me very well. I was talking to Jim Burrows once, who is, the Mozart of TV comedy directors. And I was asking him about shots and this and that. And he said, look, if the story works, you can have one camera and just shoot the master of the whole show and it'll work. And if the story doesn't work, you can have all the camera angles and cutting you want, it's not going to save it. So yes, it was a big help to me having that experience, being able to say to the actors, okay, I see what's wrong here. You need help with the script. You need a few more lines before you can get this angry. Okay. The reason why you're having trouble here is you have to go from 0 to 70 in 2 lines. And that's, you need help here. And I was also able, this is something Jimmy did, and no other director I know of other than me would do the same thing. And that is, we would go back to the writer's room after the run through, and I would sit with the guys while we discussed what was wrong and what needed to be fixed. And I would kind of help them, along that line as much as I could, which proved to be very helpful. It was helpful to me that this is what I need. And also it was very helpful because you go down to the stage the next morning and you have your table reading and you're able to say to the cast, okay, this is what they did last night. These were the problems. This is how they addressed it. And there were certain things where actors would go, well, where's my joke? And you're able to say, the script was long. It was not you. You did a good job with the joke. The script was really long. It's a joke that was easily liftable as opposed to something that was more integral to moving the story forward. That's why you lost the joke. So it helped in communication. Also, by that time, I had been a showrunner. So I was used to coming down to the stage. And if I saw something I didn't like, with the blocking or something, and I'd go, wait a minute, why is she here and she over there? This is a private conversation. Put them together. Why are they standing back there in the corner? Why did you put them at this table? The audience can't see them over here. You put them over here at this front table, and then we can have background and you can have some depth and, and geography and stuff like that. So I had that aspect, and I also spent a lot of time editing these shows. So I would work with the editor and I'd say, okay, go to the wide shot where we see the full costume. And he goes, we don't have it. I said, wait, what? It's a costume joke. He comes in dressed like Mr. Pickwick, and you only have it up to here. So, as a director, I would go, okay, this is what I need to make this joke. And also, reaction shots are so important. When a director is directing a multi-camera show, which is like directing Rubik's Cube, you have a camera coordinator who works with you, making sure that all the shots are right. And so he'll go down the script and it's like, okay, Kelsey's line, all right, we have Kelsey on camera A, and then his line we have on camera C, and then Roz we have here. And he's making sure that everything is covered. But I also want reaction shots that aren't in the script, that I know when Sam says this, you're going to want to cut to Diane's reaction to it. So I had that going in my head. And also knowing like, okay, this show is running a little long. I suspect that they may cut this section of a scene. So when I block it and when I set my cameras, do it in such a way where you can make that lift. Okay. Don't have somebody cross the stage during that section, because then if you lift it, the guy pops onto the other side of the room. Don't just have a master so that there's nothing to cut away to. So there's like all kinds of things that are going through your head besides just, directing the actors, that my experience was able to, to help me with.
Well, you said Rubik's Cube, and that's what it sounds like, a Rubik's Cube on stage.
Yeah, you got 5, 6 people on stage and you have 4 cameras. You want to get a master and singles and reaction shots and 2 shots, and it's all happening fluidly while the scene is going on. And then when somebody moves around the couch, then the cameras have to move, and are you covered? And those guys are amazing. The camera people in LA, if you're nice to them, you know, I remember there was an episode of Becker that I was directing, and it was in the diner, and somebody had to go way upstage in the corner to the coat rack. And so as I'm camera blocking that scene, I'm saying, all right, I'm going to have to do a pickup. Fred, I'm going to have to send you way up the line to give me Ted in the corner there. And he said, I can get there. And I go, Fred, you have like a line and a half, you know, because I got you on Reggie. And then they cut away to Bob saying, yeah, well, you know, I looked in my lunch pail and I didn't have anything. That's all the time you got. You got 3 seconds to get up there and frame it and do it. And it's like, I get it. I get it for you. And for them, that was kind of part of the fun, was sort of the challenge. If they like you, if they don't like you, good luck.
Thanks to Ken Levine for chatting with me. You can hear more from Ken on his terrific podcast, Hollywood and Levine, available wherever you get your podcasts. Did you enjoy this interview? You can find lots more just like it on the Fast Cheap Movie Thoughts blog. Check out the link in the show notes. Plus, more interviews can be found in my books, Fast, Cheap, and Under Control, Lessons Learned from the Greatest Low-Budget Movies of All Time, and its companion book of interviews with screenwriters called Fast, Cheap, and Written That Way. Both books can be found on Amazon or wherever you buy your books. And while you're there, check out my mystery series of novels about magician Eli Marks and the scrapes he gets into. The entire series, starting with The Ambitious Card, can be found on Amazon in paperback, hardcover, ebook, and audiobook formats. And if you haven't done it already, check out the podcast companion to the books, Behind the Page, the Eli Marks Podcast, available wherever you get your podcasts. Well, that's it for episode 119 of the Occasional Film Podcast, which was produced at Grass Lake Studios. Original music composed and performed by Andy Morantz. Thanks for tuning in, and we'll see you occasionally.